proposal largely unrelated to the problem. About 9% of the money is in the healthcare space. Less than 1% of it deals with vaccinations. And so it's of a size that might have made sense a year ago, and in fact it's about the size of the CARES Act, which we passed in March or April of last year. This is not a year ago. We're making extraordinary progress with the rollout of the vaccines. The economy is struggling to get back on its feet and did not ever become as bad as the doomsday projections at various points a year ago. So we think this package should have been negotiated on a bipartisan basis, like the last 5 bills were done. Instead, the new administration made a conscious decision to jam us, to do it one party only, to take advantage of the reconciliation process to try to achieve a whole lot of other items completely unrelated to COVID-19. So we'll be fighting this in every way that we can. It is my hope that at the end, Senate Republicans will unanimously oppose it, just like House Republicans did. And I think it's noteworthy that over in the House, the only thing bipartisan about the proposal was the opposition to it.
Well, the really objective right now ought to be getting vaccines to as many people as possible. I mean, I think that's the best solution to get this pandemic behind us. And I think, as has already been pointed out, less than 10% of all the money in this legislation, the $1.9 trillion, actually goes towards spending on public health. A very small fraction, small percentage of that amount. And so the White House Chief of Staff has described this as the most progressive domestic legislation in a generation. Meaning that they have had their eye on doing this by themselves in a very partisan way from the very beginning. This didn't have anything to do with consulting Republicans, although Republicans were asked down to the White House. It's very clear that Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, and the left wanted to use this as an opportunity to get a lot of their liberal wish list accomplished. That's clear, and it is a wasteful, bloated, and partisan piece of legislation which they're going to try and jam through this week under reconciliation. As the leader pointed out, last year, when the Republicans had the majority here, we did 5 coronavirus relief bills, all of them under regular order at 60 votes, with bipartisan support, bipartisan cooperation here in the United States Senate. This is clearly an attempt to railroad this thing through, and I hope that, as the leader pointed out, our members, as we go through the amendment process here the next few days, when it gets to the end, will unite and do what the House did, and that is vote against this thing and make the Democrats own a piece of legislation that I think is going to have long-term adverse consequences for this country and do very little to deal with the immediate concern, and that is what we do to address the coronavirus.
Well, this is the 6th time we're dealing with coronavirus in the United States Senate. This time is very different than the last 5 because this is purely partisan. Didn't have to be that way. President Biden could have done it very differently, could have worked in a bipartisan way, because that's what he's promised in his inaugural address. But he's chosen a different path in spite of the fact that we did 5 bipartisan bills before he got to the White House. But because of him and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, here we are facing a $1.9 trillion so-called coronavirus relief bill, which when it passed the House, there was bipartisan opposition. Say, why would that be? Why would every Republican vote against it, as well as some Democrats? And it's because it is packed with pork. It is a wish list of liberal spending. What does it do? Bails out states, bails out big cities, bails out failed union pension plans. And what does it fail to do? Because if you were giving this a grade, you would give it an F grade, because it fails to get people back to work, it fails to get kids back to school, and it fails to put the virus behind us. Only $1 of every $11 in the entire bill actually goes for COVID health care needs. And that's why every senator who left for lunch today has this card with them, and it's what President Biden's chief of staff had to say on MSNBC a couple of days ago. It is the most progressive domestic legislation in a generation, which means it is much more progressive than even Obamacare. This is how far they continue to go with this. So this is the way Nancy Pelosi gets $140 million for her tunnel of love to Silicon Valley. The people of America deserve better. Joe Biden ought to go back to the speech that he gave at the inauguration. He ought to go back to how he campaigned on unity, on bipartisanship. He ought to actually rewatch his campaign, his inaugural address, and try to live up to it.
We spent some time at lunch today talking about the importance of getting kids back to school. There's a McKinsey report out that says the average student at the end of the 9-month school year will be 9 months behind in math, that students of color will be 11 to 12 months behind in math, and similarly behind in other topics, though math appears to be the biggest challenge of when you don't have in-person learning. John King, the Secretary of Education for President Obama, said we're running the risk of an entire lost generation of students by not having kids back in school. Nothing in the bill we're talking about is designed to get kids back in school. In fact, if money was the solution, there'd be no problem. We've already appropriated $67.5 billion to elementary and secondary education. As of February 1, I think $5.1 billion of that had been spent. So $60 billion available to get kids back in school, and none of it being used for that purpose.
I think we might have a new name for this package that's come over. It's the porky, partisan, pricey pet project package. We can throw in a few more P's like Speaker Pelosi. So what we have in this bill coming over is several, please, I'm underestimating, millions upon millions of dollars for a subway system in California. We have millions upon millions of dollars for this lovely bridge to get from New York into Canada. And folks, how is that helping us fight COVID? This is supposed to be a COVID recovery package. And somehow I don't see my Iowa taxpayers benefiting from those porky, pricey projects. Okay, it has nothing to do with COVID relief. So what is in this bill? What else is in this bill? We have unemployed millionaires that will be able to access enhanced unemployment benefits. We have millionaires that are now able to participate in child care programs that were developed for low-income families. Millionaires benefiting off of our lower-wage taxpayers. So what else have we got? The blue state bailouts that have been mentioned, which doesn't benefit Iowans at all. So what we see is a whole lot of nothing going to some of these other states. It's not about COVID relief, folks. It's not about partisan, or it is about partisan politics. It's not bipartisan at all. So, folks, we need to refocus our efforts and make sure that our taxpayers are actually seeing a benefit for COVID relief. That's not what we have in front of us right now. And believe me, I will spend every last hour telling the American taxpayer about all of the pork that's wrapped up in this pricey partisan package. Thank you.
Well, first off, Republicans care about getting people back to work and getting kids back to school. This package doesn't do that. Let's remember where we are financially. This country now has over $27 trillion worth of debt. When this package finishes, we'll get to $30 trillion worth of debt. That's $6 trillion of additional debt in 1 year. That's staggering. We're already seeing, look at what's happened since Biden got elected. Interest rates are up. Inflation is increasing. Who's it going to impact? It's going to impact the poorest families. Our debt to GDP is now 140%. 140%. There's a day of reckoning. Who's it's going to hurt? It's going to hurt the families get hurt when interest rates go up and inflation happens. I grew up in a poor family. That's the families that are going to get hurt because of Biden's economy, and it's going to be a bad economy.
Legislature is pursuing changes to how a vacancy for U.S. Senator can be named. Senate Bill 228. Do you support that effort? And does movement on the bill mean anything for your plan to remain in office for your entire term?
Are you talking about the bill that would change the way a vacancy is created?
Yes.
Yeah, I do support it, and I think it's a good idea, and I'm all for it.
Does it have any implications for your
Oh, no,
time
it has no implications for me. As you may have noticed, I just got reelected to a 6-year term.
On that topic, Leader McConnell, former President Trump this weekend took a lot of credit for your reelection in his speech at CPAC. I was wondering if you could respond to his comments there, and also how you think his endorsement might impact 2022, especially if he endorses against one of your senators like Lisa Murkowski.
Yeah, well, I want to thank him for the 15-point margin I had in 2014 as well.
On Lisa Murkowski or any of your other senators, sir?
Do you support raising the minimum wage to about $7.25? Some of your members support $10 an hour. Is that something that you could get behind?
Well, Senator Romney and Senator Cotton have been talking about our proposal for a minimum wage increase. It is true that it hadn't been raised in quite a while, and I think it's worth discussing. But we know the result of a $15 federal minimum wage increase all at once. 1.4 million lost jobs. That's not what we need in the middle of a pandemic.
Sir, just
anyone else?
Circling back to CPAC for a moment, he said that you asked for his, former President Trump said you asked for his endorsement. I'm curious if you did ask for it, and obviously you made that nod there to 2014, but if you had any further comments on him taking credit for your reelection.
Yeah, I think I've answered that. Okay, thanks everyone.